Hello everyone, my name is Andrew. Today we'll continue working with our financial exchange in Python, and today we'll work with a new schema, user routes, and we'll fix some bugs. So let's start. We have 3 tasks for today, and in the previous video we added register and login routes. So all those can be seen here in our Postman schema, and the schema itself can be found in the comment below. But what is the problem? The problem is that our current login uses cookie. So cookies to authenticate our user, and if we go to transports in API user auth transports, we can see that it's a get transport. So get transport is a function that allows us to get our transport, and it returns a cookie. The problem is that Postman as an application itself does not allow us to send different cookies between different requests. So if I send login GVT, I will receive my cookie. So let's actually do it. Let's start our project. Alright, the project is started, so let's send our request. Alright, so we can see data null, so that says that we don't have an error, and if we go to headers, we can see that we have set cookie as fast API user auth. So that fast API user auth allows us to authenticate our user. However, if I right now go to logout GVT, and if I send the same request, it's gonna say unauthorized. Even if I look everywhere for my cookies, for my headers, I'm not gonna see them. And that is why I created a simple script that will allow us to do that. So if I go to login GVT, you can see that there is a tests highlighted. We go there and we can see that there is a simple script. So we get auth cookie from PM. So postman.response.headers from index2, which means our headers, our cookies, and .value is our cookie value. Then we get our token from auth cookie substring, starting from the equal sign and ending with semicolon. We're doing that in order to get just the value of the cookie. So we don't need to send the whole cookie, we just need the value of it. And then I'm saying PM collection variable set auth cookie token. Collection variable is a simple variable that is stored in the collection. So I showed you environment variables, which are stored in the environment, but that is our collection variable. And as you can see, we have auth cookie, and it's gonna change every time we send a new request from login. Because every time we login, we need to change that GVT value, because I want to remind you that that is a GVT. It's stored in the cookie, but that is a GVT at the end of the day. And how we're going to use that auth cookie is very simple. If I'm in my Findev and folder right now, and if I go to Findev and per request script, what I can see here is pm.request.headers.add. So we're simply adding our cookie header ourselves, and we're saying user auth equals to something. Of course, right now we need to change some things in our cookie transport to make it work. So the first thing that I'm going to change is make our cookie name as user auth, because right now it's something like fast API user auth or something like that, so I don't like that, and let's just make it user auth. And in our PM request headers add, we're gonna say user auth equals to our collection variable. So that code is only for the Postman. You don't need it to run our project in your browser, you just need it for Postman, because every other environment is gonna work really fine, kind of like that. So Postman is the only thing that requires that addition. And that is why I created it here. But of course you don't need to know it. And if you're curious, that's not Python, that's JavaScript. What I'm doing here is inside of my transports, I'm adding cookie name to our cookie transport. So user auth. It's going to be more representable, more descriptive, I think. But yeah, that's kind of like the main idea. I don't like fast API user auth. Let's go to login GVT. We logged in, and now logout says now. Why is that? Because we logged out successfully. We set our cookies to different parts of our system. And if I go to headers, we'll probably, there is set cookie, which is user auth, and empty one. So as you can see, user auth is emptied because we logged out of our account. Now let's add some of the other routes to our application. So if I'm going to go to my database connection, the first task is done. So new schema works perfectly fine. We don't have anything in terms of authentication problems. Let's delete it. The second one is user routes. So users routes, what is that? We only have login and register right now, but we need to get the information from our user. We need to update our user information. We need to do all sorts of stuff. And if we want to do that, let's go to Fast API users documentation, and here inside of the routers, if we expand it, I can see that we have users router as the last router available. And that router is basically the thing that will allow us to manage our users. Let's go to our users API, and here as the last function, I'm gonna add define get users router. And it's just gonna be returning fast API users get users router. We can add one variable which is called requires verification. Right now it's false, but if you want to send emails to verify your users, of course you should put it as true. And we're going to do that in the future, but not right now. Because if we're talking about exchanges, we need to add something called KYC, or know your customer. Because yeah, people can do some illegal stuff with our exchange and we don't want that, so we want to know each customer that we're working with. Yeah, if you worked with Binance, for example, you know that you should upload your documents whenever you register on Binance in order to trade or do anything. The same is going to go for our own exchange. But for now, we just can get user router, and let's go to our main API file. Here I'm going to use app include router with get users router. And let's import it. Then prefix is going to be /users. Okay, it ran. And now what we have, if I'm going to go to my localhost 8000 docs, I'm going to see that we have some other routes aside from login and register. So what we have here is users me with patch and get users ID, delete users ID, and patch users ID. So the first two routes are the only ones that we're going to use. All of those, so users ID for get, users ID for delete, and users ID for patch are only going to be used by super users. And if we're going to make an admin panel, we're going to use those routes. But for now, we don't need them because we don't have any super users in our system. So no one can invoke those commands, kind of like that. But users me and the users me once again with patch and get are going to be used all the time, because users me for get is used to get our information, so get the information of our user. Let's go to our Postman schema, because we don't do requests from the docs, we just use them in order to get the information. And what I'm going to do here in my Postman schema is I'm going to go to users, press here, add folder, which is going to code management. All right, and inside of management, I'm going to add a new request, which is going to be called get my user. And let's add our host variable, users me. That's the only thing that we should do. And as you can see, when I send my request, we receive our user. We created that user in the last video, and yeah, we have the email, we have that we are active. As you can see, is super user is false, but we should remove that field in the future. So yeah, username is our username and everything works fine. Now let's add another request, which is going to be called patch. So update my info. I'm going to call it just like that. And the only difference between the first request and the second one is patch. So the method. That's the only difference. Patch and put methods are really similar, but the main difference between patch and put is that patch method is the one that just updates your fields, so it mutates your object. But put method deletes your old object and replaces it with a new one. So we're going to use patch in order to just update the fields that we need. We don't want to replace the whole user, although it's valid, but we don't want to do it right now. So what I'm going to do here is users me, and we're just going to patch. If I send my request, you can see that we have an error. So body, field required, field missing. That's because we don't send anybody. Yeah, anybody in our request. So let's go to body row, and here I'm going to choose JSON in order to send any information that we need. If I'm going to open up a JSON object with that curly brace, you can see that the only thing that we're missing is username. So it's a bug. Why is that? Because if we're thinking about it, why do we need to update our username if I don't want to do it? So I don't want to update my username. What if I only want to update my email, for example? So let's update it to test@gmail.com, something like that. If I only want to update my Gmail, well, that's going to be a problem, because right now I need to also add my username. And why is that? That is because of our schema. So if I go to my users schemas, we can see here that here we have get username field, and that field is required. So inside of user and user create, it should be required, because user and user create, so whether use or user as a schema, or we create our user. So when we create our user, we need to provide the username. But user update requires that username as well. And the only thing that we are going to do in order to fix it is use optional. Optional from a string. So optional inside of our user update is going to make sure that we can either provide our username or we can just omit it. If I'm going to rerun my project, let's wait for a little bit. Yeah, it's really long with new PyCharm version. Let's run it once again. And as you can see, everything is perfectly fine. Aside from that, we updated our user information. So our email is now test@gmail.com. If I'm gonna put test123, let's update it. As you can see, test123. So everything works perfectly fine. And we still can update our username, but right now it's not required as it used to be. So let's update it for Python123. Yeah, we need to ensure that we have at least 10 characters. So yeah, Python 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Kind of like that. So that is patch and get my user. As I said, the other 3 routes are for super user only. So if we're gonna have to invoke them, they're gonna receive or return an error. And yeah, kind of like that. Nobody can invoke them right now. Nobody can call them. So let's just leave it as it is. Okay, so we are done with that. But there is one big problem that we need to fix. If we go to the database connection as well, we can remove our user routes because we added them and they work perfectly fine. But bugs is the only thing that we need to fix. So what do I mean by bugs? The first thing that we should do is somehow refactor our schemas. Because right now we're using Pydantic, the thing for our API inside of our database. So I thought that it would be okay, but I don't think it right now. So yeah, we use Pydantic model inside of UserDB. All of those are Pydantic models. So maybe we should put them somewhere in our users in API folder. But there is another problem with that UserDB and other models are used inside of the database. So if we are going to look for UserDB, we're going to see that that UserDB is used inside of managers. So yeah, kind of like that. We can also use getUserSchema, by the way, getUserSchema. Or, you know, getUserSchema, where do we use it? I don't really know. Managers, well, yeah, getUserSchema here. Let's go here, let's go here. We use it inside of adapters. Let's actually rename the function to be getUserDBSchema. Kind of like that. Or even getUserDBSchema. It's going to be fine. And let's replace it inside of our managers. So getUserDBSchema here and getUserDBSchema here. So we can see that we have our UserDB as an object. I'm not really sure why I did it, but let's just leave it as it is for now. Or no, actually let's remove it. So yeah, I removed my getUserDBSchema. I'm not really sure why I did it before, but for now we're just going to use the object. And as you can see, user manager is dependent on our UserDB. So it's going to be really, really hard, but we're going to have to refactor it. So our schemas are inside of API and our models are inside of database. But for now, let's just leave it as it is. The only bug that I want to fix is a bug with our username. Because if I go to our models, here we have fields char field. But we need to make sure that our char field is not just an empty string, because what our users can do right now is just put something like that. And it's going to be a valid username, but we don't really want that. And in order to do that, we're going to have to create 2 validators. The first validator is going to be used inside of model. So define is valid or is check empty username. Let's go just like that, check empty username. It's going to have value as a string, so the username itself. And what we're going to have inside of that check empty username is we're simply going to have something like that. If value.strip not value.strip, then raise validation. Alright, so username cannot be empty, but else we return our value. So if our value.strip, which returns the string without white spaces on the left and the right side, is nothing, so it's not. Not means that our string is an empty one. And if we remove all the white spaces, if a string is an empty one, we raise a validation error, saying that username cannot be empty, or else we return the value. And right now, the only thing that we should do inside of our model is just add that validator here. So validators is a list of check empty username. And it should be, so we should not add parentheses because we use it as an object. Let's put a comma here and everything should work fine. Alright, so we have check empty username, user model, and get user model. However, we're still going to receive an error. So why is that? Because we check our field inside of our user model. It's beneficial for us because if we would want to create our user somewhere else, so if we want to create our user somewhere in our code programmatically, we're going to have to make sure that username is a valid one. However, if we want to check that our user sent a valid username, we're going to have to change it inside of models. And right now it's going to be really, really hard for us to do that because we have a normal string and a normal field. So we can either use validators. So validator is kind of like a function that uses, or a decorator that uses a function that validates your value. But the problem is that validators are simple functions. And we have three separate fields. So the fields are separate, but they're similar to each other. The only difference is that user update is an optional username. So how can we do that? We can use constraint strings. So what is a constraint string? Instead of get username field, I'm going to create a class called username field. It's going to be a constraint str, kind of like that. If I'm going to import it from Pydantic, so from Pydantic import constraint str, what we're going to have here is just a simple class that will allow us to put all the settings that we need. So constraint our string. And the only difference between field and our username field is that we just put all the values just like that. So min length equals to something, max length equals to something. And there's also a value called strip whitespace. So that stripped whitespace is going to allow us to do the same thing as we did it here. So yeah, value strip whitespace is just going to delete all the whitespaces from our string. Right now, if I'm going to go to user create and user update, I'm just going to delete all of the get username fields calls, because instead of that, we're just going to simply replace our str to our username field. So kind of like that, username field. And that's it. So the only thing that we're doing here is we're saying that our username field is a constraint string. So we have min length, we have max length, and we need to strip all of the white spaces. So we need to delete them. Then we have our user create, and user update, which use username field as the type of their username property. And that username property is going to have to remove all the white spaces. And if our string is an empty one, we're going to have an error. Kind of like that. So let's restart our project and let's check that that works. Now let's wait for a little bit and let's go to our patch. So instead of username, I'm just going to provide a lot of white spaces. And if I'm going to send my request now, if I send my request once again, you can see that the response is ensure this value has at least 10 characters. That response allows us to see that we have no characters in our username because all the white spaces were deleted. But we still can change our username to something, something like that. So to normal strings, kind of like that. So if we're going to need to update our username in the future, we're just going to have to update our username field. So that is it for today. Thank you for watching. My name is Andrey. Subscribe to my channel, leave a like, leave a comment, and bye bye.